Hello, reality sandwich community. Kyle, your favorite conscious agent, back with another Share Your Experience. I'm joined by the wonderful Stephanie today. How's it going? Happy Friday.
Hey, happy Friday. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. We like to start these off. If you, in your own words, could give a brief introduction to yourself. Those of us in the psychedelic industry, let's call it, are very familiar with your work. But for our audience tuning in, could you give a brief log line download on who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a neuropharmacologist by training. I founded a consultancy called Beyond Consulting, strategy, operations, and research solutions for all kinds of initiatives and organizations in the plant medicine and psychedelic space. So that's biotechs to nonprofits, to clinics, and even individuals who might be on a journey back to health. Um, so my work is very mixed right now, but I came from the ICU, where I focused on traumatic brain injuries, and it was very much my catalyst into the psychedelic space. It was very clear to me that the options that these individuals had were just not quite adequate. They were staying on the same medication for far too long and not really getting better. And so I had that light bulb moment and started to, look for someone in that specialty who might be open to exploring innovative solutions. My own experiences were also definitely catalysts for this change, I guess, in like career course and path. And I think a lot of us share share that in common. Beyond this space, I'm a community builder. I'm a speaker and a writer, and I ventured into spaces where I'm very passionate. So, music, for example, I started a music label with one of my best friends, and it's an interesting space. The psychedelic plant medicine space is an awakened one, and I think music really weaves itself well. And overall, I just want to be a bridge between the science and the spirit, and an advocate and an educator for everyone out there of all levels.
Beautifully put. I like that phrase, a bridge builder between the science and
Mhm.
the culture community, let's call it. What
Mhm.
were what was the reaction from colleagues when you first started to broach the subject of psychedelics? I'm sure there were mixed reactions from the more scientific medical community that you worked in as you wanted to start exploring these alternative plant medicine paths for people.
Totally. A lot of like raised eyebrows for sure. But what's great is, I came from a very scientific background. I also worked in corporate healthcare for Johnson and Johnson Medical Devices for 6 years. And these are people who speak the language of science, and, science within the psychedelic experience isn't everything, but it's a huge piece. And I think science is really awesome. And for the people who speak the language of science, luckily for us, there is a ton of science. So being able to reach people in that way has been super helpful. I just think about my mom as well. She's a clinician, and I remember when I started talking to her about mushrooms, and she was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" But I found the point of entry by showing her clinical data. She has migraines, for example, and so I was like, look at the research around chronic headache, look at the research around cluster headache, and I noticed quite quickly, like, okay, if I can convert my mom, then I can reach other people by breaking down, complex scientific information and making it digestible. And I think there are a lot of people who are still skeptical, but right now I'm noticing just a lot of support overall, which is really nice. People have been reaching out and expressing that, okay, I've been hearing a lot more about this. This is really great that you're in this space. I think you're doing good work, and I think that's really encouraging for sure.
Well put. Something I'm noticing about the quote industry right now, there are a lot of people offering psychedelic coaching certificates, a lot of, I feel education being put out there, but our take on that is, you don't truly know these medicines until you try them yourselves or have the experience yourself. So what was your first psychedelic plant medicine experience that did you try cannabis when you were a teenager? What was your first introduction to a plant medicine psychedelic experience?
It was cannabis. But like my first cannabis experiences were not profound. They were just silly and fun, which is great, why not? Um it it's interesting because I actually developed a more clear relationship with psilocybin mushrooms before I developed a very clear relationship with cannabis. And I have a very good relationship with cannabis. I really like cannabis. It's just that my first experiences, I don't know if it was just my age, my lack of knowledge or intention, I'm not quite sure, but it didn't reach me in the way that it reached me later on. And I would have to say that it was really psilocybin. I remember I was with a group of friends and I had just moved to LA. I hadn't been too long. And I was with a group of friends going to Joshua Tree to hang out. And we had mushrooms. And I accidentally broke off 3.5 grams from this
Mhm.
chocolate bar. And I looked at it and something inside me said, just do it. Like just do it. And so I have to say that it was very defining and it was a very profound experience. Of course, there were moments of silliness and joy, but there were a lot of profound moments for me. And what marked me even more than my own personal experience and response to the mushrooms was my friend. I had a friend who also decided to venture down the same path with the same dose. And she actually had an emotional release like I had never experienced that. Like I had seen people take small amounts and just enjoy themselves. She might have actually cried for 10 hours straight. And
Mhm.
so I had to navigate my own experience and hers, you know, be there, try to hold space, and also just like wrapping my mind around what was happening. I had never seen anything like that. And so that actually marked me more, just witnessing my friend have this release, have this catharsis, recount these stories and these experiences about her childhood and her life. And it was so interesting, and it was sad tears that then would turn into happy tears, then would turn back into sad tears. And I was on her ride with her. I remember sometimes pulling myself away to just like compose myself and just center myself and give myself some space to feel what was coming up for me. And that was just really interesting. And it was also very much this moment of like, wow, this is extremely powerful. How are other people using them? And that's kind of began my exploration. And it was very much like a self exploration. It was when I realized that mushrooms were not just this like silly thing. A lot of people were like, oh yeah, let's go take some mushrooms and just gallivant. But then it's that is experiencing myself. I was like, no, there's a reverence here. There's a respect. There's something else that people were missing. And for me, that was back in 2018. The conversation about mushrooms was very different. If you fast forward 3 years later, when I really started to look at it from a more professional lens, people were having a different kind of conversation around mushrooms. And it wasn't just like, let's take mushrooms and go to a concert. I was hearing about indigenous practice, about ceremony. I was hearing about therapy. So it's interesting now to be here and just look back at that like as a timeline, how much I've learned. And I have to say that that experience with mushrooms also changed my relationship with cannabis for the better. It opened up something. It opened up a channel of communication. Cannabis became more than just like this social thing. It became an instrument or a tool to just reach higher levels, to go deeper within myself, to think about, important life changes and moments. So, yeah, respect to the plant.
Absolutely, these plant medicines do deserve respect, and obviously, the highest and best is to do them in ceremony. Whether that's taking it at a rave, that could be your ceremony, or sitting with the ancestral wisdom and some of these
Hmm.
shamans. You mentioned a good point. Since 2018 was kind of the quote legalization fully of cannabis here in California, and now only a handful of years later, we've got a full blown psychedelic industry emerging. What has been your take on seeing the industry evolve thus far, and what concerns you or excites you most about that?
What concerns me, I think, is I guess a couple of things. What concerns me is that as things become more mainstream, you find yourself just opened up to just more risk and irresponsible use. I think I would like to see a world where, plants like psilocybin mushrooms are decriminalized. Like, I think I would really like to see that. It's what concerns me is the lack of education. It's like we're moving fast, and I'm seeing like people pump the brakes. Decrim hasn't passed in California yet, so the brakes are being pumped, even though on a cultural, social level, people really want it. And it's everywhere. Like the underground, strong, and it'll never. I don't think it'll ever go away. So awesome. But it's the safety and the education, I think, that's really missing. People need to also just be curious, and if the information isn't coming to them, they need to go towards the information. As the underground is percolating, there's all kinds of stories that we're hearing, like the diamond shroom story of people getting really ill and possibly like hospitalized because they've ingested a product that wasn't integrous and that wasn't safe. And so how do you, if you're going to go the underground route and you're going to supply things for yourself, how do you make safe choices? How do we make the underground more safe? Because there are people doing amazing things in the underground, not just in terms of like facilitation and on the therapeutic medical level, but also just on the product level. There's excellent products. People are going the extra mile to supply amazing products. How do we ensure that we are finding those people and that we are pushing out those who aren't respecting this space? Like, if you're going to say this is psilocybin mushrooms and you're not putting psilocybin mushrooms in there, like, you don't belong here. This is not what this is about. And that goes for, like you said, a social recreational scene or a very highly ceremonial scene, because even recreation, people are waking up to the fact that recreation is a ceremony of sorts. I've been talking about this topic of joy for a little while now. Like, joy is incredibly healing. We need to be able to cultivate it, to create it. And if going out into the woods with your friends or to Joshua Tree and taking mushrooms recreationally is what you want to do it, because that it's bonding, it's connecting to you and your friends and nature. And it's an experience that will be full of joy, and you can integrate that. You can have intention around that. So I'm worried about people just trying to scam. I'm definitely worried about that. I'm also worried about young people just taking it all too lightly. We hear stories of just, teenagers consuming a lot of mushrooms and just not being prepared. Right. So I just want this like message of educate yourself and prepare yourself for whatever you want to do. I don't care, but just go the extra mile. And then on the industry side, let's make that education more accessible. People are trying really hard now with Instagram pages to have advocacy pages and information, and these pages are getting taken down. So these are the things that concern me. On a more positive note, what I'm excited about is this revolution. People are waking up. I'm seeing it on all kinds of levels, not just psychedelics. People are just waking up to their own selves, and they're grabbing their lives back. They're taking control of their wellness. They're prioritizing their mental health. They're prioritizing community. I think, 2020 quarantine, COVID, isolation just really shook up the planet and reminded us that we are not alone and that we shouldn't be alone. So I'm excited that this, like our generation and the generations to come, are prioritizing these things. And I think that's the psychedelic movement is a huge part of that. I think there are going to be a lot of changes on an educational and training level for people who are in, or therapists in trainings, physicians in trainings, researchers. People are now prioritizing learning about these things earlier on. I would love to see more of this in the curriculum. Like, I remember when I learned about MDMA in my pharmacology class, it was basically like, this is an illicit party drug. It's going to torch your brain. That's all it was. Right. And I did take a couple of like plant medicine pharmacology classes. They were electives. That was amazing and eye opening. But I want to see more of that earlier on. And I think that the more research, the more advocacy, all of these efforts that we're seeing now are going to lead to like a systematic change so that the future generation is going to be reshaped. And I think that's really exciting.
Well put. Curious. I'd love your take at, you mentioned education. Something we're obviously seeing a lot of is from some reputable people and some not so reputable people, but these courses, these get your psychedelic certificate so you can be a facilitator or a coach, and as somebody with a true background in science in the medical field, what is your take on the rise of these non-accredited certifications floating around all out there? People are paying $12,000 to sign up for an intensive 1 year training program. And does that truly prepare them to be a facilitator? Even though they haven't taken these substances themselves, they may be a psychologist or a doctor trying to educate themselves. But again, these are not accredited. These are, just, they may come from some reputable industry people, but still there's no formal process to get a true stamp of you're certified.
Yeah, I do think that you should experience them if you want to speak to them. Like it's not the same as experiencing like, an SSRI. That's just not we're not in the same league here. I admire the effort of trying to train people, and I admire people taking it upon themselves to create um, educational documents and courses and all of that. But it is very important work that requires just a lot of responsibility. And people can be in very vulnerable states, and you have to be equipped to support people when they are in these vulnerable states. So I am weary of all of the training programs because it's not that you need to standardize everything and protocolize everything. This is work that you cannot really protocolize. You can protocolize it in the sense that you know what is safe and what is unsafe. You know how to keep people safe. You know how to exclude certain people. If they have certain illnesses, if they're pregnant, like you have these kind of criterias, right? And you know about dosing. We know a lot about dosing and we know about safe dosing. So on that level, yes, but it's very individualized, high touch work. And the facilitator or the therapist or whatever, right, needs to have boundaries, needs to have a certain approach. The information that is being shared and dispersed needs to be of a certain caliber so that we can continue to keep people safe. So I am really weary because without standardization on that level, how do we know what that information is looking like, and how do we keep people safe? It's difficult because there's so many people doing it in the underground that's never going to get standardized. So now the responsibility isn't necessarily on the trainers or the educators and as much or like the governing body. The responsibility falls within the individual who's seeking it. You have to be able to decipher. You have to be able to be discerning. How do you teach discernment? you know? So I think it's about putting a lot more education about harm reduction out there about I love to see articles that are like what you should look for in a facilitator, like stuff like that, right? And there are voices that, are louder than others. There are, outlets for media and news, and there are organizations and associations that have kind of risen to the top because they are backed by people who practice with integrity and people who practice ethically. And I just want to keep moving those people forward so that they are the voice. But this is the thing. This whole industry is very hard to control right now. Everything is just bubbling up, and so that's why we have to take it upon ourselves to learn how to make proper choices. But I'm definitely weary, especially these courses that are just cash cows, because it's a great way to make money, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it's the quote, our take is it's the most legal path to make money, versus selling a chocolate bar or
Right,
some
right,
substances.
right.
This is the, safe way to be cash flowing your quote
Mhm.
psychedelic business.
Mhm. Mhm.
What research have you been working on that's exciting, or you're excited to share and point out, projects you're working on or advising on, what's been keeping you inspired and motivated?
Yeah, well, one project that is almost ready to launch. I am a research advisor for the Microdosing Collective, which is a nonprofit in Los Angeles that strives for safety, harm reduction, advocacy around microdosing. So, safe, low dose psychedelics. And we put together a survey around chronic headaches. So, this is this is really interesting because we're hearing a lot about cluster headaches and all of the research around there. And we want to know, just across the board, if you suffer from chronic headaches, any headache that is chronic, it's 15 or more headaches per month for a period of 3 months. So can you imagine? Your quality of life is severely impacted. So we put together a survey. This is just to collect information about people's use of psilocybin or LSD, because these are the two psychedelics that seem to be at the forefront of research right now, to collect data about their use of psychedelics during the period that they have chronic headaches. Has it helped them? How have they been using it? What else have they tried? Yeah, we're gonna launch this survey at the beginning of next year. We want to recruit as many people as possible to get this information. I think that first and foremost, it will be really interesting to just see a positive correlation. So, have people been using these two psychedelics and have they found relief? If there is that relationship, then this is great, because we can use this for advocacy. The microdosing collective is really going after like policy efforts right now. Like, can we create a world where in California you can microdose at home safely? Can we create a framework for this? Having these types of like proof of concept research projects or studies that demonstrate that there's a population that's in need and there's a population that's benefiting from these psychedelics would be in our favor. So in terms of these, policy efforts, having research like this is really, really valuable. And then just for for future research in the scientific community, we can use this survey as a springboard for more. So I'm excited to launch that because we've been working really hard on it. And I'm also involved with a clinic in Los Angeles called Modern Medicine Services. It's an integrative health clinic with a focus on mental health. So we have all kinds of alternative services like acupuncture, different needle therapies. We have sound beds, nutrition support, but we also have ketamine assisted therapy. The belief at this clinic is that psychedelic assisted therapies are an integrative medicine and should be practiced with an integrative care model. And what we really are interested in right now is recruiting groups within oncology, within chronic pain, post acute traumatic brain injury or severe concussion, and women's health, and creating protocols that are very specific and tailored to these populations, and putting them through these protocols and really trying to help them and really monitor how well they're doing. So assessing them pre and post. And I'm really excited about doing this. We have a super skilled team of psychiatrists, integrative medicine physicians, very highly specialized registered dietitians and nurses. So I'm really, really excited about that. And then another project, Evan Lewis is a neurologist, also a medical advisor to the Microdosing Collective. He's out in Toronto. We've partnered on some research around spinal cord injuries and psychedelics. And first and foremost, the paper that we published last August was about harm reduction, to make sure that people are screening for spinal cord injury, because there is an adverse reaction when people with spinal cord injury consume a serotonergic psychedelic. So that was the first important piece of it. But now we want to explore how psychedelics could help that community. This is a community that often suffers from PTSD due to their injuries, due to the interruption of their quality of life, and that have other issues, mental health issues, substance abuse. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into these niche populations that a lot of these studies that are going on right now exclude because they're complex. And yeah, in terms of research, these are some of my main focuses right now. And I think, overall, women's health is having quite the moment right now. There's a study that didn't come out too long ago. You can find it on my website. I wrote a summary, but it's about sex differences, male versus female, and the psychedelic experience. And not just explaining why the psychedelic experience is different from women, especially if you look at their cycles, because there are changes in estrogen and there's a relationship between estrogen and serotonin. It's not just about the felt experience, but it's also about the opportunity to help women with the different challenges with their hormones. Because even if you don't suffer from any kind of, health issue like that's diagnosed or any like hormone imbalances, women's hormones fluctuate their whole lives, through puberty and pregnancy, postpartum, and then perimenopause. So this is something that we haven't been focusing on. It's something that's not talked about, but it's an opportunity to help women navigate life, but it's also an opportunity to help women who just aren't finding relief with traditional conventional therapies. And I think that's just like a big message right here about psychedelics. If we're talking about the more medical standpoint, is you deserve the right to try. If things aren't working for you, you deserve another option. And if you don't even want to go the traditional route, you deserve to try something different. And that's what I want to see. I want to see more practice changes amongst clinicians. I want clinicians to just be more educated about what options they can offer their patients when their patients are just like, no, I don't want to go on another birth control pill. I don't want hormones, right? Um, yeah, yeah.
What is your current, you currently have a microdosing regimen? What is your current, plant medicine ritual, or even not, if you meditate, what does your current ceremony and ritual look like?
Yeah. Um, right now, I'm not taking any psilocybin microdoses, but I do have some beautiful plant medicines that are part of my daily life or just, part of life in general. I'm really into Blue Lotus. I feel like I've been researching a lot about lotus. My heritage is Egyptian and Greek, and the Egyptians were very much into lotus. I think that it's really interesting for dreams, and I'm really into dream work. It's also just a nervous system, relaxer, and it relaxes the body from stress. And so at the end of the day, I think it's a really beautiful way to wind down. Um, and functional mushrooms are part of my everyday life as well. I think Kana, which is a South African plant that is psychoactive but not psychedelic and is legal and accessible, is also a really beautiful plant, just for just daily, mood, even for connection. I think it's a really great one to explore, especially in a bit of like these higher doses. I think it's fantastic for couples to explore kana together. And some of my favorite functional mushrooms are lion's mane and cordyceps. I take them every day. I feel like they're great optimizers. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. No, a ritual that I like is just music, some incense, and some Blue Lotus smokes. It's a nice way to end the day.
Wonderful. You mentioned you started a record label. Music plays a
Mm,
huge role in the psychedelic experience. Very key
totally.
when doing an ayahuasca ceremony and some of these other plant medicines. I'd love your take on the importance of music in the psychedelic therapeutic healing experience.
It's Music is such a guide. I think it not only deepens the experience, but it enriches the experience. I think it plays in parts of our mind that we're so not aware of. And that can go both ways, right? Like it could influence a journey or an experience for the better, but it could also influence it or guide it in a direction that, we might not want to push someone in a direction if it's like if we're talking about like a medical container, right? If it's like a patient relationship. So I think that we need to be thinking about music a lot more than we realize. I don't think that, when we're talking about the medical container, putting on a Spotify playlist with like lyrics and like music that's all over the place, like we really need to give it some thought. Um, Music in itself is just inherently psychedelic, just in itself. Like forget taking substances. It just sets you free. It takes you on a journey, an emotional one. It can take you back through time. I think that just the concept of taking a psychedelic like MDMA and going to dance or listen to music, like that is a cultural movement that started long, long ago. We can go back even to, indigenous time, like indigenous people, hundreds of years ago when they had ceremonies, it always involved music. It was a way to commune with each other, to go inward, but also celebrate and connect with the divine. So these are practices that have existed for forever. And then when we see people take a psychedelic like MDMA and go to a dance party, whether it's like 1975 or 2024, it's stigmatized. What's the difference? The difference is you've got some people who are doing it frivolously, irresponsibly, unsafely. But let's just move those aside for a little bit and just look at the practice, the ceremonial practice of taking a psychedelic to expand your mind, to drop you in deeper, to connect you, going, listening to music, moving your body. I want to destigmatize that. I mean, I know that a lot of people tell me, that's privilege. Okay, yes, it is. It is definitely a privilege to be able to consume a substance that is not legal. But we live in a privileged world. Just the fact that you and I here are talking to each other on a Friday morning, on our computers, like that is privilege. I want people to realize that there is a deeply healing piece that it is almost like necessary to the human experience, to commune in this way. It is deeply healing. And I'm not talking about healing from a place of brokenness. I'm just talking about leading from wholeness. And going back to the topic of joy, we need to foster these moments. If you just look at the act of going out dancing, I think I keep seeing these little studies, these little blurbs come up on social media being like, if you want to combat depression, go dance. Go dance to music, go see other people, go connect and bond over this music. I have learned so much about myself in these environments. I have learned what it means to have an open heart and to be fully embraced for who you are, to accept others, judgment free. I realized also that I wanted to surround myself with people who believed in these things and that, think it's important to show up exactly as yourself and be accepted and just feel safe. And talking about like electronic music and house music, you go back to New York where Paradise Garage and house music really came together. It was all of these marginalized groups that didn't know where they belonged, that couldn't go out and just be themselves. They all found themselves at Paradise Garage, just being, just being. So music is so essential, not just for, a psychedelic experience involving a substance, but just the life human experience. And we need to definitely think about it more and more in a different way.
Beautiful. Where can people follow you? Where can they follow your research? Any exciting events you'll be participating in coming up? And how can people reach out to stay in touch?
Yeah, social media, my handle is Steph, Steph, two underscores, the letter K, so Steph K. My website is beyondconsulting.life. And on there, I have all kinds of info about my work and projects that I'm working on, some research that I've published. And I also have a blog, and there are a few things that are in the works right now. I'll certainly be at South by Southwest speaking about women's health and psychedelics. I'm really excited about that. And I've been touring a talk called The Chemistry of Joy with my good friend Jane Garnett. She's a psychotherapist. The Chemistry of Joy is an Instagram page. I encourage you to follow it and follow our journey. I think it's a really beautiful conversation about joy, but we also dive into plant medicines and psychedelics and the real neurochemistry of joy, and also just the felt cultural experience of it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, Stephanie, thank you for the time today. Very insightful conversation.
Thanks. Thanks.